Okay, so we are reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on Canto 3, Chapter 1, and the text for today is text 40, Prabhuji. So over to you. Kindly let us know if you wanted us to read something. Hare Krishna.
So I'll start off with Mangalacharan, and then even I can read the verse.
Okay.
Or actually, even Mataji, maybe you can read the verse for a change. You can read the Sanskrit, but I'll say my Mangalacharan, and then we'll go on to the verse. Om Jnanatirmahannasya Gyananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jetam Suruto Pangor Mama Mandir Materyati Matsarvasva Padambojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpatrumadaha Srimad Ratnakara Simhasinasto Srimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prashtalibe Sevyamano Smarami Shriman Rasa Rasa Rambe Vamsi Vata Tata Stitahan Karshan Venu Staner Gopi Gopinata Shriye Stunahan Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Gayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadeshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivashadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Rayanam Namaskrityam Naram Che Rotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Tirayat Ashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloker Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from third canto, chapter 1, verse 40. The chapter is entitled The Status Quo, the canto is entitled The Status Quo, and the chapter is entitled Questions by Vidhur. So, Mataji, would you like to read the Sanskrit verse for today?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I'll try. Aho prapidhiryate rapakarte Rajarashivar yena vinapanitena Yashtva eka virodhareta vichigne Dhanurdvitya kakubhas chatarshraha.
Wonderful. So this verse, translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Abhay Charanarvindam Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, O my Lord, Is Pritha still living? She lived only for the sake of her fatherless children. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to live without King Pandu, who was the greatest commander and who alone conquered the 4 directions simply with the help of a second bow. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Bhai Charanarvindam, Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. A faithful wife cannot live without her Lord, the husband, and therefore all widows used to voluntarily embrace the burning fire which consumed the dead husband. This system was very common in India because all the wives were chaste and faithful to their husbands. Later on, with the advent of the age of Kali, the wives gradually began to be less adherent to their husbands, and the voluntary embrace of the fire by the widows became a thing of the past. Very recently, this system was abolished, since the voluntary system had become a forcible social custom. Excuse me for 1 second. When Maharaj Pandu died, both his wives, namely Kunti and Madri, were prepared to embrace the fire. But Madri requested Kunti to live for the sake of the younger children, the 5 Pandavas. This was agreed upon by Kunti at the added request of Vyasadeva. In spite of her great bereavement, Kunti decided to live, not to enjoy a life in the absence of her husband, but only to give protection to the children. This incident is referred to here by Vidur because he knew all the facts about his sister-in-law Kunti. It is understood that Maharaj Pandu was a great warrior and that he alone, with the help of bow and arrow, could conquer the world's 4 directions. In the absence of such a husband, it was almost impossible for Kunti to live on even as a widow, but she had to do it for the sake of the 5 children. So a very interesting verse in a very interesting chapter, in a very interesting literature, the Amala Purana, the perfect Purana, spotless Purana. So actually, let's begin today's class by referring to the Padma Purana, which actually refers to the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's interesting that one Purana should glorify another Purana, right? I mean, there's many reasons why this is interesting, because in one sense, the Srimad Bhagavatam was compiled by Srila Vyasadeva in his, it is said in the first canto, it was compiled by Srila Vyasadeva in his maturity, first canto, 5th chapter, when Vyasadeva is talking to Narada Muni, and he's having some doubt that he hasn't come to the conclusion, and he feels dissatisfied in terms of his contribution. So the Bhagavatam should really be the last literature. So how is it that we now have a reference from the Padma Purana glorifying the Srimad Bhagavatam? This is one of the many Achintya Shakti aspects of the Shastra. Obviously, we understand that the Bhagavad is eternal. Yes, these pastimes happened 5,200, 5,300 years ago. Or sorry, they concluded 5,200, 5,300 years ago and went back into the many other yugas. But actually, this is happening again and again. The Lord's pastimes are eternal. At the end of this Kali Yuga, another Satya Yuga will occur. And again, all the Dasavatara will come. The different expansions of the Lord will come. And these pastimes will go on eternally. So while Vyasadeva may have compiled it for the first time within this Chatra Yuga, actually the Bhagavatam has been compiled so many times. And in fact, you will see variations in the Shastra. For example, in the previous Satya Yuga, Lord Nrsimhadev appears out of a pillar. But in some instances, Lord Nrsimhadev actually flies in to come and kill Hiranyakashipu. So we are going to read from the Padma Purana, glorifying the Srimad Bhagavatam, even though the Padma Purana was compiled before, chronologically in this Chatra Yuga, before the Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, the Padma Purana is eternal, and therefore The Srimad Bhagavatam is also eternal. So even if there's a reference in the Padma Purana before the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's no inconsistency. Like scholars would try and pick that apart, but that's because they don't understand the cyclical nature of time and the cyclical nature of these pastimes. And in fact, this is not, I'm now taking a transect, but now we're on the topic. You will find references even in Srimad Bhagavatam to things which have not happened within this Chaturyuga. So for example, discussing the pastimes of the different manas. We know that we are in the Swayambhuva manas, or Vaivashrita manu. But there are so many different manas, Swayambhuva manu, and you will see references to things which have not just happened in previous yugas, but in previous Chaturyugas, previous days of Brahma. So that is the eternal nature of Srimad Bhagavatam. But anyway, onto the reference of Padma Purana. Pado yadiyo pratama dvitityo tritiya turyo katito yaduru nabhistata panchama eva shashto punjantaram dhoryugalam tatanyo Kantasturajan navamo yadiyo mukarvindam dashama prafullam ekadisho yasya lalata patam shiro pitu dvadasha eva bhati tam adidevam karunanidhanam tamalavarnam suhitavataram Apala samsara samudra setum bhajamahe bhagavata swarupam bhajamahe bhagavata swarupam bhajamahe bhagavata swarupam. So these three shlokas translate as follows. The first and second cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam are Sri Krishna's lotus feet. The third and fourth cantos are his thighs. The fifth canto is his navel, his abdomen. The sixth canto is his chest. The seventh and eighth canto are his arms. The ninth canto is his throat. The 10th canto is his beautiful lotus face. The 11th canto is his forehead. And the 12th canto is his head. I bow down to that Lord, the ocean of mercy, whose color is like that of a tamal tree, and who appears in this world for the welfare of all. I worship him as the bridge for crossing the unfathomable ocean of material existence. The Bhagavatam has appeared as his very self. So we're on to the third and fourth cantos. These are the thighs of the Lord. And, different commentators like Kavi Karnapur and Krishnadas Kaviraj, they go into detail about the beautiful nature, not just of Krishna's face, but also of his thighs, of his deep navel, the way his nails shine like pearls. So every part of the Lord is unimaginably attractive. And so now we are onto the thighs. The thighs of somebody are the biggest muscles. They take the most weight. So the lotus feet of the Lord obviously are our only shelter. The third and fourth canto are creating the pillars upon which the rest of the Bhagavatam, the weight of the rest of the Bhagavatam will be held. And we can see, it's very interesting. I've talked about previously how Srimad Bhagavatam exemplifies this Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, right? Hearing, Shravanam, Kirtanam, hearing, speaking, and remembering. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. Because we have layers upon layers of different conversations which are going on here. We have Sutta Goswami and Shaunaka Rishi, right? That is the initial conversation. We then have them relaying on the conversation between Sukadev Goswami and Parikshit. And now here we see also that we have Vidur and Maitreya speaking. So we have three levels of conversation. Vidur and Maitreya are having a conversation, which is being relayed to Sukadev Goswami and Parikshit. which is being relayed through Sutta Goswami and Shaunaka Rishi, which is ultimately being relayed between Vyasadeva and Ganapati, because we are reading Vyasadev's Srimad Bhagavatam, and Vyasadeva narrates it. And the reason that Ganapati, Ganesh, is missing one task is because he is writing the Vedas, he is compiling the Vedas as Vyasadeva is narrating. So that's a fourth layer of conversation. But then we have a fifth layer of conversation, which is actually Srila Prabhupada to us. So at any one time, there are 5 conversations going on here. There is 5 transmissions. And yet we see that the message stays the same. The message stays the same. It is like a family recipe. People have secret family recipes. And in order to get that tasty laddu or that perfect palak paneer or whatever it may be, you can't change the recipe. It must pass on. Krishnadas Kaviraj talks about in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is like passing the fruit of love of Godhead. It's passed down from one branch to the next branch to the next branch. And each people in different parts of the tree are taking that fruit and carefully handing it down to the person below them. Transparent via medium. And yet we know that certainly my Gurudev would mention, Sri Srimad Bhakti Swami would mention that beyond being a transparent via medium, the unique benefit of being part of this Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya is that the acharyas are not just acting as a transparent via medium, they are acting as a lens. A lens, what is the nature of a lens? A lens focuses, a lens brings out greater detail. A lens can zoom in to particular parts of the philosophy, particular areas which require particular attention. And if this canto can teach us anything, and if the purpose of this canto can teach us anything, it's how Srila Prabhupada, of course, Srila Prabhupada has compiled the commentaries of the previous acharyas, Sridhar Swami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Sanatan Goswami. These were some of the Prince Ajiva Goswami's Brahma Sandarbha. He has compiled from this, but Srila Prabhupada has acted as a lens to focus in on specific details philosophically that he considers extremely important for the inhabitants of Kali Yuga, post Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to focus on. And I think that specifically this verse, where the emphasis of what Srila Prabhupada has talked about in this purport is a key demonstration of that. So going on to the, drawing attention to the verse, Srila Prabhupada said, well, Srila Prabhupada's translation, "O my Lord, is Pritha still living? She lived only for the sake of her fatherless children. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to live without King Pandu." So first of all, we'll analyze the translation, and then we'll talk about how Srila Prabhupada has what Srila Prabhupada has emphasized within the purport. "Oh my Lord, is Pritha still living?" So Pritha, if people don't know, Pritha refers to Queen Kunti. Now, why does Queen Kunti have this name, Pritha? So Pritha was actually the name that was given to Kunti by her father, her birth father, who was King Surashena. Now, King Surashena had a great friend called King Kunti Bhoj. King Kunti Bhoj was unable to have children. So, feeling sympathy, the circumstance came about that Kunti willingly, or Pritha willingly, became the adopted daughter of Maharaj Kunti Bhoj. But her birth name is actually Pritha. So this name Parth, which is often given to Arjuna, Partha Sarathi, in fact, the deities of one of the crowning of the many wonderful achievements of Sri Srimad Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, the temple in Delhi, Radha Partha Sarathi temple, was one of them, opened by then Prime Minister, the late Shriman Vajpayee, that land in the heart of Delhi. And actually, the beautiful ISKCON temple sits on top of this hill. So across all of south of Delhi, you can see Radha Partha Sarathi. So Parth is Arjuna, Parth, the son of Pritha. So when Pritha became the adopted daughter of Kunti Boj, she did so because he was a father without a child. And we can see here in this verse, she lived only for the sake of her fatherless children. This idea of father-child relationship becomes very important in Maharani Kunti's life, because then what happens? Durvasa Muni comes to Kunti Boj, and King Kunti Boj, Durvasa announces he's staying for 1 year. And anyone who knows Durvasa knows that that means we're now in a tremendously precarious situation. Durvasa Muni, obviously there's a famous episode with Maharaja Ambarish that all he did was took a tiny pea-sized amount of water so as not to miss the muhurt. And Durvasa Muni tried to destroy, tried to annihilate Maharaja Ambarish over such a small offense. And it was only because the punya would be lost. And again, it was only a tiny drop of water. So when Durvasa Muni is in town, you better lock it down. If that was a motto, that should be the motto. So who was put forward? It was Kunti Devi, Prita. She had such a service attitude. I've read commentaries that in the middle of the night, Durvasa Muni would wake up and wake her up and say, I'm hungry. And she would have to prepare all these preparations, and he would take one mouthful, spit it out and say, this is disgusting, and throw the food out of the window. And she would humbly accept. There was time, I read this one pastime that she once prepared food and the plate was too hot, so he couldn't hold the thali. So she bent over as a human table and he placed the scalding hot plate on her back. And she accepted it with all humility, without complaining, scalded it back while he took prasadam. This was the level of service. And even Durvasa Muni, the infamous or famous or reputedly hard taskmaster Durvasa Muni, was so enchanted by Kunti Devi's service attitude that he gave her what benediction? The benediction that she can invoke anyone, any deva, to have her children. And then what was the result of that? She ended up inviting Surya Bhagavan, Surya Dev, and she had the child Karn, a child without a father. Father without a child defined her initial part of her life. In the next part of her life, she then brought in a child without a father. And then again, so separation happened. She then became married to Maharaj Pandu, Chhatrapati. It even says here, he conquered all directions. Chhatrapati or Chakravarti. Chatra or Chakra means a wheel. Actually, generally, even within Purusha Shukta, you'll read when Indra is given the benediction, it is not to conquer 4 directions, it is to conquer 8 directions. 10 directions. 10 directions. How can there be 10 directions? North, south, east, west. Then northeast, then southeast, then southwest, and then northwest. 8. And then up, and then down. So when you're protected, the greatest Chakravartis, like Bali Maharaj didn't just conquer all directions. He conquered all of the heavenly planets and he conquered all of the hellish planets. And he made the whole universe. He was the real Chakravarti. But anyway, Chakravarti, all the 4 directions, Maharaj Pandu had conquered. And Prita marries this great Pandu. But then very shortly afterwards, after inviting the Devas and okay, these children will have a father, then what happens? He leaves. So a father without a child, a first child without a father, then 5 more children without a father. And it is claimed in this verse that for the sake of her fatherless children, she forsook achieving the destination of her husband in order to take responsibility. And yet, if we see what was the actual situation when it came to Kunti Devi, what was the actual situation? Was she only staying for the sake of her father's children? If you go to the first canto, I think it's the think it's the 15th verse, 15th, sorry, first canto, 15th chapter. It's like the 33rd verse, I think. As soon as she hears Arjuna narrating to Yudhishthira Maharaj that Krishna is no longer on the planet, immediately she makes preparation to leave this body. Immediately she makes preparation to leave. She's not thinking about the responsibilities of what will happen to her grandson Parikshit. She's not thinking about, what will happen for the rest of the Pandavas or Draupadi. Immediately, she's just overheard it. She hasn't even gone to clarify it. She says, right, that's it, finished. So in one sense, her life was defined by this child-parent relationship. But actually, the driving force behind Kunti Devi's existence is the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything that she has done has ultimately led her to that point of the Supreme Personality of God. But it's also said in Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Yoni Shukanteya Murtaya Sambhavantiya Tasmam Brahma Mahadyonir Aham Bija Pradapita. Aham Bija Pradapita. That actually Aham Bija Pradapita, Krishna is saying that I am the seed-giving father. So in one sense, it is consistent. When the seed-giving father of all living entities decides to leave this planet, again, it will become the defining feature of Kunti Devi's life. That she will say, if my father has now gone, I am going with my father. Sri Krishna is the father of all, and she is going to be united with her father. So in one sense, we can see that this parent-child relationship has been the defining feature. We then see that Srila Prabhupada in this purport starts to talk about something which is draws controversy. I mean, people, in order to discredit the Vedic culture, Bharatiya culture, would often look at Varnashram Dharma, which they would term the caste system, and also this concept of sati, the idea of a wife wanting to leave her body because her husband has left the planet. And, of course, I think there's two important things to consider when we consider any lofty Vedic principle. We should neither reject immediately because it doesn't align with our perception, nor should we artificially accept or imitate sentimentally. And there's a principle of Atmavan Manyate Jagat. I expect other people to see things in the way that I see things. A child will want sweets for dinner, and the parent is intervening, or an adult is intervening. And in the child's perception, the activity of the adult is cruel, it's wicked, it's unfair. But that's because the child's perception cannot see that actually that activity of the adult it's actually beneficial to that child. In the same way, a very kind of simplistic person will see sati, people wanting to pass something. Maybe they're atheistic, maybe they have no appreciation of the spirit soul, and they'll see this jumping into the fire and they say, hey, what is this nonsense? But just because they themselves have not experienced that path that Kunti Devi and Madri Devi had for Pandu, that ultimately Sati, Parvati herself, had for Mahadev, because they are not privy to their level of commitment, chastity, and faithfulness, that in the fourth canto it's described how Sati, Bhavani, she loved Lord Shiva so much. Even though Lord Shiva, and we'll look at that verse, Lord Shiva was from such a humble background. She is she's from such an illustrious situation. The amount of respect that she had, she couldn't be a moment without Lord Shiva. Because people may not have that reference point of that chastity and dedication of a wife. They can't understand why anyone would be driven. But again, that doesn't mean that we artificially imitate. I mean, as another example is Ramachandra Puri. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's guru is Ishvara Puri. He had a god brother. Ishvara Puri had a god brother called Ramachandra Puri. And he would see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu crying and chanting and in these kind of moods. And he said this, in fact, he even said it, I think he even said it to his own guru. He said to his own guru, either Ishwara Puri or maybe Mother Vendra Puri. Mother Vendra Puri was leaving the planet. But suddenly to Chaitanya, he said, why are you crying so much? Should be sober. Sannyasi should be sober. Because he himself could not experience those ecstatic symptoms. He could not appreciate them when they occurred in another personality. So Atmavan Manyate Jagat. We project our own way of seeing things onto others, not thinking that maybe our perception is limited and they may be operating at a much higher frequency. So that's one side. We shouldn't artificially reject. But on the other side, we shouldn't artificially imitate. We shouldn't artificially imitate. You know, we have so many of these upper sampradayas who artificially imitate the relationship between Krishna and the gopis, Saki Bekis, so many things. And who are these other ones? Gora, what are they called? Gora Nagaris. Some are saying, I'm the gopi of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What nonsense. He is Sannyasi Romani. How can you be the mood of Radharani? How can you be the gopi of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? I am the gopi of Krishna. This is Gopi Bhav. You're a lady, I am a man. Let us enact Ras Leela. This is just artificial. So neither do we reject, neither do we artificially accept or imitate. We must understand, however, that the Shastra is eternal. And tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadakshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshana. We will understand the truth of something once we serve the spiritual master. And through the eyes of the spiritual master, sooner or later, we will have that full understanding. So if it is a Shastra injunction, which we have some doubt on, do not imitate, but do not reject. Serve the spiritual master, engage in your sadhana, and then the realization will come. Some people want to change Srila Prabhupada's purport because they say, oh, this is not acceptable now, and this and that. Srila Prabhupada is not talking about the sentiments of Kali Yuga people. Srila Prabhupada is talking in a way which is reverberating throughout eternality. Now, we may not have that full realization, but that does not mean we should reject. But if we don't have that full realization, neither does that mean we should imitate. But if you serve the spiritual master with faith, then the realization will ultimately come. But that is the way to treat the injunctions of the Shastra and ultimately the injunctions of the spiritual master as well. So I'd like to touch upon this purport of this initial chapter of the purport. Srila Prabhupada is talking about a faithful wife cannot live without her lord, the husband, and therefore all widows used to voluntarily embrace the burning fire which consumed the dead husband. This system was very common in India because all the wives were chaste and faithful to their husband. Later on, with the advent of age of Kali, the wives gradually began to become less adherent to their husbands, and the voluntary embrace of the fire by the widows became a thing of the past. Very recently, this system was abolished, since the voluntary system had become a forcible social custom. Again, forcible social custom, that's imitation. When Maharaj Pandu died, both his wives, namely Kunti and Madhuri, were prepared to embrace the fire. But Madhuri requested Kunti to live for the sake of the younger children, the 5 Pandavas. So it's interesting, this conversation between Madhuri and Kunti, actually Kunti as the elder wife had greater entitlement to engage in sati. But Madhuri was very honest and she said, you will be impartial both to my children and to your children. But I am filled with this filial affection for mine. So therefore you are more qualified to guide all 5 children. This was agreed upon by Kunti at the added request of Vyasadeva. In spite of her great bereavement, Kunti decided to live, not to enjoy life in the absence of her husband, but only to give protection to the children. So I'd like to, now this whole incident actually stems from, as you may or may not know, where Sati So Parvati takes 9 lives with different names. Now, the very first name is as Sati. That is the original partnership between Lord Shiva and his consort, Sati. Sati appears as the daughter of Daksha, the Brahmana Daksha. And later on, Parvat means the mountains. When she comes back again in her next form, she comes as the daughter of Himalaya, the daughter of the Parvat, the Himalayan mountain. So in this first, I'll read the actual incident. In brief, what happens is that Daksha is having a yajna and Lord Shiva is not invited. Sati goes there against the request of Lord Shiva, or against the advice of Lord Shiva, to say, hey, how have you not invited your daughter and your Jamai Dhularaj to the great yajna that you're holding? Now, ultimately, she is offended. Lord Shiva is offended. And in that offense, she leaves her body. She says, you've killed my husband's reputation. I cannot brook this. And she leaves her body. And from that, and she self-combusts, goes into a yogic trance, enters into flame, and she leaves her body. So before the act of sati actually occurred, even if the husband's reputation was tarnished, what to speak of them actually leaving the planet? Even if the reputation was tarnished, the wife did not want to accept a world in which the husband would be at all insulted. So I'll read this. I'll read this particular pastime. So it's the fourth canto, chapter 4. Sati quits her body, and the verse is 26 and 27. Sati concentrated all her meditations on the holy lotus feet of her husband, Lord Shiva, who is the supreme spiritual master of all the world. Thus she became completely cleansed of all taints of sin and quit her body in a blazing fire by meditation on the fiery elements. So Lord Srila Prabhupada then refers to this later in an earlier verse, which we'll actually come to in the third canto. Third canto, in the past tense of Devahuti and Kardama Muni, there's a purport. So third canto, 23rd chapter, first verse. Srila Prabhupada says, today in Hindu society, unmarried girls are still taught to worship Lord Shiva with the idea that they may get husbands like him. Lord Shiva is the ideal husband, not in the sense of riches or sense gratification. And come on, Lord Shiva doesn't even have a house. Lord Shiva just has an asan that he sits on, and he sits outside in the middle of the mountains. It's not even like a beachside resort. You know, he sits in the most austere place. He doesn't wear good clothes. He has a snake around his neck. Sometimes he's covered in ash. And yet he is considered the ideal husband. Now, you try going to any Indian family today and put forward a potential husband covered in ash, living on a blanket in the mountains. And I doubt you'll get many takers. But this is what the Shastra is saying. Lord Shiva is the ideal Vaishnava. He constantly meditates upon Lord Ram and chants Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Lord Shiva has a Vaishnava Sampradaya, which is called the Vishnu Swami Sampradaya. Unmarried girls worship Lord Shiva so they can expect a husband who is as good a Vaishnava as he. Okay, now check this point. This is amazing and really goes into the consciousness of a true marriage and of a faithful wife that is willing to enter fire for her husband. Of course, the husband should be akin to Lord Shiva. The girls are not taught to select a husband who is very rich or very opulent for material sense gratification. Rather, if a girl is fortunate enough to get a husband who is as good as Lord Shiva in devotional service, then her life becomes perfect. The wife is dependent on the husband, and if the husband is a Vaishnava, then naturally she shares that devotional service of the husband because she renders him service. This reciprocation of service and love between husband and wife is the ideal of householder life. So the fact that, and Srila Prabhupada actually echoes this sentiment elsewhere, that if the husband is a great Vaishnava, simply by faithfully serving that husband, the wife will go back to Godhead. She will perfect her life. So the nature of, if the husband is an incredibly dedicated Vaishnava and the wife is an incredibly dedicated wife of that Vaishnava, she will benefit from his devotional service to the point of being able to go back to Godhead. So what does that mean? That is the true definition of a pati guru. If your husband is delivering you from the cycle of birth and death, is there any greater personality in this world than he? Is there any greater shelter in this world than he? Is there any greater source of happiness in the world than he? So if that was then removed from this world, would you also not feel like leaving this world? Imagine if you had the association of Srila Prabhupada every single day and the joy being with Srila Prabhupada. And then Srila Prabhupada left this world. Would the tendency not be that this world is now void? This world is now vacant. What is it that I am doing here? So this is not an artificial kind of, oh, I met this guy and, you know, we were married for a few years and he's passed away now, so I better jump in the fire. No, this is a transcendental commitment. This is a commitment to leave this material realm together. And that union, true grahastha ashram, it's an ashrama. An ashrama is for what? Spiritual advancement. Spiritual advancement towards the purpose of life, leaving this world completely. If that shelter is taken away from you, you would consider the world vacant. And if you consider the world vacant, you vacate. You vacate the vacant. You will vacate. So we should understand clearly that if this topic ever comes up, we say, okay, we don't artificially imitate, but neither will we reject. This is a very high principle. And this is a principle which, as a society, we should be working towards. Even if we don't commit the act of sati, in a true grahastha relationship, the shelter that a husband gives to a wife, the faithfulness by which a wife serves a husband, means that they consider this world completely empty in the absence of that relationship. And that is not a degrading principle. That is an ennobling principle. With the union of those two people and the offspring from those two people, what kind of offspring will they give if that is the consciousness of those two? What sort of standards does that set? Rather than the kind of casual dating that we've all become accustomed. We don't even bat an eyelid now, casual thing, where one is acting as a pure servitor of the Lord and the other is acting as a servitor of the servitor. What an amazing relationship. And that is to be, again, to be praised and not to be. We should remove any doubt in our mind there is something corrupt or what's the word, unideal about this mentality. It is understood that Maharaj Pandu was a great warrior and that he alone, with the help of bow and arrow, could conquer the world's 4 directions. In the absence of such a husband, it was almost impossible for Kunti to live on even as a widow, but she had to do it for the sake of the 5 children. So it was I wanted to read one other purport, which was from earlier on. And it's, a good son is called apatya. This is Srila Prabhupada, one who does not allow his father to fall down. The son can protect the father's soul when the father is dead by offering sacrifices to please the Supreme Lord Vishnu. This system is still prevalent in India. After the death of his father, a son goes to offer sacrifices at the lotus feet of Vishnu at Gaya, and thus delivers the father's soul if the father is fallen. By the way, that custom was also maintained by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Gaya, and that's where he met Ishvara Puri on behalf of his father. Hare Krishna. I've just forgotten Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's father's name. Sachimata. Nilambar Chakra. No, Nilambar Chakravarti is his grandfather. Somebody help me here. What's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's father's name? Anyway, I'm having a mental flash. No. Hare Krishna. Anyway, that's just Kali Yuga memory. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also went to Gaya. But if the son is already an enemy of Vishnu, how in such an inimical mood can he offer sacrifice unto Lord Vishnu's lotus feet? Jagannath Mishra is the father of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Krishna is directly the personality of Godhead, Vishnu, and Duryodhana was inimical to him. He would therefore be unable to protect his father, Dhritarashtra, after his death. It's very interesting though. So in the same way that we are taught to be very dutiful, and of course we should be dutiful to our children, a very interesting point, and you can see Kunti Devi's duty for the sake of the 5 children. I would say even more difficult than being this dutiful is potentially the choice that was given earlier on to Dhritarashtra to give up a son who is not dutiful. Could we honestly, I mean, maybe in Kali Yuga people they're fighting for the right to kill the child in the womb. But I think for anyone who has some trace of piety, to give up the whims of a son who has fallen. I mean, Chanakya even says, what is the one son who is elevated is better than 100 sons who are fallen. What is the use of 100 sons? Better to have one son that is elevated. Are we able not to capriciously give up our responsibility, but to also, what I should say, it's easier, it would seem, to be dutiful towards children who are not fallen. But could we give up the attachment to children who are fallen? And that is the suggestion of Vidur. So often our judgment is clouded. To what degree do we oversee the activities of those just because they are close to us? And this is not just a question of a father and son. Administrators, we can see even in the US, a presidential pardon was given, even though he promised he would not do it. Outgoing President Biden, his son was convicted of gun offenses, of drug offenses, of illegal activities and collaborating unlawfully with foreign governments for nefarious activities. And the president gave his word that I will not pardon him. And yet, because of this filial affection, what did he do at the last? He pardoned him. And this we see when we become clouded by this material attachment, rather than the principles of dharma, society as a whole will diminish. Why? Because Krishna even says within Bhagavad Gita, what great men do, what men in positions of importance do, the common man will follow. The common man will follow. Why is India known as Bharat? Because Bharat Maharaj was willing to forego the entitlement of his own son because he realized his own son was not fit to rule Bharat, and he gave it instead to another citizen. That is why India, the land of Dharma, is known as Bharat. But if we give up these principles, if the great men give up these principles, will we not also do that with our own children? And what will be the consequences of that? If we overlook proper conduct for the benefit for our full sense of attachment, what happens to society at large? We can see it playing out in front of us. We see it playing out in front of us. So anyway, to many things that can be said, this is a very interesting part of the Bhagavatam. We're really getting into the heart of Bhagavatam, and I find that the conversations between Vidur and Maitreya are some of the most illuminating. This whole period is some of the most illuminating for the practical principles that we can learn. The foundation is very much set by the first and second canto, but the conduct, nature of relationships really is played out. Husband and wife relationship. What does genuine service to the husband look like? What does genuine service to the wife look like? What does genuine service to the people by the king look like? This will all be brought out by Vidur, because Vidur himself is Dharmaraj. He is the king of Dharma. But I think the final thing that I'll say on this is that even Vidur, wise, dutiful Vidur, as you will have heard previously in this chapter, even he becomes shocked at the nature of Duryodhana's venom, the rudeness and the cruelty. So what does that mean? But then ultimately, Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport that kartaham vimudatma prakriti kriya karmani gune karmani sarvasaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manite. That Vidura's ultimate conclusion is that even if you do your duty perfectly in this world, the material nature is the material nature. And ultimately, this world is a place of suffering. So when he sees that despite doing all of his duty, this is what he's faced with, immediately he relinquishes. He relinquishes everything of this world. And it says that he travels incognito, going to the holy places just to purify himself. Because even he, as one of the Mahajans, as Dharmaraj, is contaminated by his worldly association. So if even Vidur can become contaminated, if even Vidur can become frustrated by this world, what to speak of us? And there has to come a point when we also start to increasingly and increasingly absorb ourselves within the society and the association of devotees exclusively as we come into the latter part of our life. Because despite any of our faculties, we will become contaminated by the association and the capricious nature of the material energy. So that is, for me, the beauty of this chapter. Thank you all very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Tantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Any questions or corrections?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for excellent session today. I mean, yes, I always used to wonder about sati and I never got the right answer. And I think today is the day of revelation for me. And I really understand it. And I know you are aware, but in this day and age, we don't do sati, but when a husband and wife leaves their material body in quick succession, would that be the same, Prabhuji?
I have no Shastric reference for it, but one can only draw that conclusion. You can see even in the UK, kind of an example. The Queen lived for so many years, and within 12 months of her husband passing, she also left. Because that separation, that obviously Dharma is not there, but you see that interdependency. Shakti and Shakti Mam, they are interdependent. The light bulb is the Shakti Mam, the electricity is the Shakti. They are interdependent, they're codependent. One cannot exist without the other. Its meaning is lost without the other. So I totally agree. It is the nature of the physical body. The subtle body will become disturbed in a genuine thing, and the physical body will lose its willingness to live. I think that's a very good point, Marty. Again, I don't have a Shastric relation, but my intuition suggests that that is the case.
Because it happened to both my in-laws and my parents. They both passed on at a difference of a week of each other.
One week. So Mataji, look at that. All glories to them and to their departed souls. For having a daughter like you, actually in this verse, it is said that, in that previous verse, Apatya, the great son or even the great daughter, are doing prayers to benefit the departed soul of the ancestors. Mataji, you are fulfilling that function so wonderfully.
Thank you with your blessings. You were there guiding me when my father was passing on. So thank you for all that as well. And without you, I would have never been able to do it. So thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Any questions or comments from the group? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble.
Indusa, can you speak loudly? Hare Krishna.
Oh, okay. Hare Krishna. Am I audible enough now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Please accept my humble obeisances and all glories to Srila Prabhupada. I had a question. You see Queen Kunti, the way, just from her staying behind to take care of the kids to a point where she was willing to take, she was telling Krishna, I don't want this family if it's kind of hindering me from my bhakti or something along that. Now I'm asking where do you draw the line between attachment and servitude, especially when it comes to family?
I think so. This question was often put forward to my Guru Maharaj. So I can only give, and actually to Srila Prabhupada also, that, oh, you know, family commitments, getting in the way of this, getting in the way of that. No. Your family commitment is your offering to Krishna. When your baby is born, your principal deity is to take care of that baby. What does it mean to take care of that baby? Raise that baby in a way that that baby can also be conscious of Krishna. If you have a family, interact with your family. And of course, you have to be sensitive and intelligent, right? But engage in those relationships in a way that you will uplift their spiritual life, and hopefully they will uplift your spiritual life. There's no question of compromising in terms of your parental or family responsibility because, quote, it's getting in the way of your service. They become your service. Now, in the situation where there is gross engagement in sinful activity at the point of maturity, I think that has to be a judgment call. But certainly, while a child is dependent on you, and until a child reaches maturity, that child is your principal deity. And even between husband and wife, you know, there was one devotee who said, my wife passed away and I didn't even cry. He said this to Srila Prabhupada. And he said it in a way that, look at how detached I am. And do what Srila Prabhupada said. He said, then you have missed the point and you need to get remarried. You have missed the point and you need to get remarried. And Srila Prabhupada says in many of these purports, it's not just the service between the husband and wife, but also loving attachment. The point of Grahastha Ashram is that we have a desire to have reciprocity, reciprocation, somebody that is faithful to us and will support us. But the nature of this world is that everything is impermanent. So even if you create the most beautiful life, just like Gardama Muni and Devahuti, Gardama Muni creates this floating island with lakes and palaces, and they enjoy for thousands of years together. But even after all of that wonderful experience, what happens? It's over, and they have to separate. And that is the lesson to be learned in this world. That permanent blissful state, you can create a Indra Lok here, but even Indra has to vacate. It's impermanent, and therefore there is suffering. So love your family, love your children, love and respect and serve with your spouse, serve the Lord together, but understand fundamentally that after having that love, that in this realm, it is impermanent. And therefore we need to find a permanent solution. We want permanent happiness, but permanent happiness cannot be found here because the clock is always ticking. Therefore, we must take that propensity that we are projecting in this world and elevate it to the spiritual standard. Does that answer your question, Mataji?
Yes. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Does that need any clarification? You sure? Did I answer it nicely? You sure?
Yeah. It kind of, yeah. Thank you.
No. If it didn't, then please, you can ask again.
No, I was just wondering, is it like a switch off? Because in the prayers she was saying I'm not really sure about the verses, but she was saying you can take this family away or something. I don't want to be attached to them because I want you. And the same woman has been there taking care of this kid. So I'm just, how do you make sure you serve those people even when you're having the propensity to be attached to them? Like your family, you're with them always. Generally, you will be attached, but how do you just draw that line and make sure your service is not attachment?
So, okay, good question. Now, I have to give some context. At the point that Kunti Maharani is leaving, her kids are over 120 years old. So it's not that they're babies who she's abandoning. You know, Arjuna and Krishna were born on the same day. So Arjuna is at least 125 years old when Krishna leaves. He's 125 after the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So when Kunti leaves, she's not leaving her children in kind of a precarious situation. she did have that sense of responsibility not to leave them as orphans. And she went to the forest with them many times, well into their adulthood life, to give them support. So Kunti is not leaving her children in a precarious situation. What's more, her eldest son is the emperor of the whole planet. He's got all facility. He's not in a dangerous situation, which means that her grandson, Parikshit, actually great-grandson, I should say, Parikshit is actually the grandson of Arjuna, and the Pandavas. He's also in his maturity. So she is not being frivolous. She understands that her family are well situated. But she realizes that now you have to call it quits at this point. And there will come a stage in all of our lives. That's why there's something called varnashram, right? Your ashrama. The human life is 100 years. Split it into 4 sections of 25. 25 as a student. 0 to 25 as a student. 25 to 50 as a householder, getting married, having children. 50 to 75, detaching yourself and retiring. And then 75 until the point of expiry, fully focused in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there is a natural progression. Between 50 and 75, you start to diminish the amount of involvement in your family and increase. And when you get to your 70s, then you kind of fully separate and you're only engaged in your spiritual life. So it's not just you flip a switch, but it's a progression. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It does. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, on the same flip side, Dhritarashtra was attached to his son, Duryodhan. And I like the question is, even if your son is not, he's not a good son, will you be able to give him up? Yeah. So
it's easy to look at these things theoretically. And I think as a parent, the amount of attachment that you have for your offspring, in one sense, I have some sympathy for Dhritarashtra. You know, you've been waiting for a son to be born. Especially he carried that sense of injustice. Finally, I'll get some vindication. I am the eldest son. I was overlooked. And now you want me to overlook my eldest son. You can see, and again, but then back to my point earlier of sati, that we don't artificially imitate what the Shastra says to do. We don't have a son, and then see the Janam Patra. The Janam Patra looks bad, and we say, okay, get rid of this child. How can we do that? But equally, we don't negate what the Shastra says, which is that a child that is fallen is not to preoccupy or to determine the course of our life. And until that realization, or we derive the realization of the Shastra, how? By serving the spiritual master faithfully, by asking these questions and meditating. And eventually, if we are presented with that problem, the Lord or the spiritual master, either within or from without, will give us the understanding and we'll become fit for that understanding. It's one of those ones. And I'll just be honest, Krishna willing, I'm not, but if I was presented with that situation, I feel Dhritarashtra's pain, you know, it's not an easy situation.
Thank you for being a human being. Any other questions? I know we have stretched our time by 8 more minutes, but if there is a burning question, is there any question, or we can call it a day? Okay, no more questions. Yes,
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. It was a wonderful class. Thank you so much.
Devi, I love this picture on the wall. This is exquisite, beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, we are always at his feet.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, Prabhu. And most of the questions what I had, Indusa Mataji already asked most of it. And also same question what I had now Kritika Mataji also asked. So yeah, if you have a bad son, like how to deal with it. And usually we in Dhritarashtra's case, he did not even tell like the good things to him probably. but at least we as parents, we have to try and tell them that what they are doing is wrong, and their ego, you have some ego issues or material desire, too much materialistic, and we can try to bring them on the track. At least if we, as a mother or a father, we can at least tell them, like, right, Prabhu, like, in Dhritarashtra, he did not even try to fix his kids, I guess.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And we have the benefit also of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You know, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared to deliver the most fallen souls. Not, we're all fallen in Kali Yuga, but he came specifically to go to the most fallen souls and deliver them. And he gave a process by which Jivera Swarupai Krishnera Nityadas. You see, what we should also take faith in and take comfort in is that while the body and the material mind is conditioned, the soul, Krishnera Nityadas, is always a servant of Krishna. It may have become covered by Maya, but it is present there. It is present there. And if we give prasadam, if we give good association, if we say deep prayers, if we can somehow have the holy name playing, Mahaprabhu is so powerful, the holy name is so powerful, maybe we can awaken those dormant spiritual tendencies, you know.
Yes.
Anyway, that's a whole class in itself. But if we create, rather than, of course, we can point out people's mistakes, right? If somebody's holding, you know, something which is dirty, we can say, hey, give up that dirty thing. But
Yes.
even better than that, if we give something wonderful, like a beautiful flower that you have on your wall, and you offer the flower, will people not automatically give up the dirty thing and pick up the beautiful flower? So
Yes.
if we create that facility that people can pick up new habits, eventually they'll give up automatically the old habits. So thank you,
Well,
Mark. Wonderful question.
Nice, Prabhu. Thank you. Yeah, that was wonderful. That it gave me a new perspective now to deal things in my life as well. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. I
Hari
hope to
Bol,
see
Hare
you again.
Krishna.
Hare
Yeah,
Bol.
thank you.
Gayatri Mata, since you are on, your video is on, you can end the session, please. Hare Krishna.
What, Mataji? I couldn't get that.
Can you end the session for today?
Oh, okay, Mataji.
Hare
Yeah.
Krishna.
Yeah. Please, everybody unmute and say Hari Bol once. Hare Krishna, please.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna
Krishna, Hare
Krishna,
Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Arjuna Das Prabhu ki jai. Thank you so much for the session. And Kritika Mataji, I'm new. Please help
Oh, you've
me.
done very good.
Yeah.
Done very
And
well.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa
Sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
On Eldred ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji, for ending the session so nicely. Hare Krishna.